Hey guys, Andrew here, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit about saxophones, and specifically, I'm going to be teaching you about the different sizes and everything. I'm trying to give you as much information as possible about the different saxophones, because I don't want you to get ripped off when you go to buy one or rent one. The first piece of information is talking about the key of the saxophones. This is getting into a little bit of music theory, but don't worry, it's necessary. You need to know it. Um, each saxophone is pitched in a different key. Like the alto sax is the key of E flat, the tenor sax is the key of B flat. Each of them have a different key assigned to that saxophone, that kind of saxophone. Um, the reason that they have different keys is just because some instruments are bigger than others and they play different notes, and basically you need to know that if you are on an E flat saxophone and you're trying to play music for a B flat saxophone, it won't sound right. Um, this is especially useful for when you're trying to buy your own music, and if you're in a band or if you're in a concert band at school or something like that, because the E flat saxophone has a specific key of music that you need. And if you go onto a music website and try to get music for your saxophone, but it's the wrong key, it'll sound really, really bad if you're trying to play along to the music or stuff like that. So basically, you just need to know what key your saxophone is in and what key you need, and you'll be all good. Okay, let's dive right into it. These first couple of saxophones are the most common of the saxophones. You see these most often in concert bands, and pretty much any band that has a saxophone will have one of these two. The first of them being the alto saxophone. This is in the key of E flat. Um, you can recognize it a little bit easier by the neck. You can see it's kind of an L shape right there, as opposed to some of the other ones. This is what I'm going to be focusing on in this series because it's what I play, it's what I have. Um, I don't really have a tenor saxophone or anything, but you can take the techniques that I'm teaching and apply them to other saxophones. So don't despair if you want to play the tenor saxophone or something like that. You can still learn from this series. And speaking of the tenor saxophone, here it is. You can see the neck. You can identify it because it's more of an S shape, while the alto sax is more of an L. The tenor sax is in the key of B flat, which is the same key as the trumpet and the clarinet. So if you want to play trumpet or clarinet music on this, you could go right ahead. It would sound the same. These two are the more common of all the saxophones, just because they're in all the different kinds of bands. They're in concert band, jazz band, marching band, saxophone quintet. All those, they would most likely have at least one of these two. These next two saxophones they're still pretty common, but just not quite as much as the alto or tenor. The next one being the more common, it is the baritone saxophone, or the bari sax, as we like to call it. It is key of E flat, which is the same as the alto saxophone. It just sounds lower. It's a lot deeper instrument. This is actually more of a low brass instrument, like the tuba, or the baritone, or the trombone, or stuff like that. By that analogy, the alto sax would be more like a trumpet, and the tenor saxophone would be more like a clarinet, just the pitches, how high they can get. But the baritone sax, it plays more often than not the bass clef. It reads bass clef, which I'll show you more about that in a later video. Basically, that just means that it's a deep instrument. It's also an expensive instrument, going deep into your pocket when you pay for it. I mean, as you can see here, $3,000 for this saxophone, and this isn't even an expensive one. This is a cheaper model. So yeah, these are pretty expensive. A lot of the time, a school or a orchestra or something like that, they will have bought one of these, and whenever someone joins, they'll say, "Hey, you're gonna play this now," and you just switch to it and learn it. And most of the time, it would have been someone who had already played the alto or the tenor, because you need to be pretty good at the saxophone to be able to play on these two, just because you you have to be able to blow a lot harder. You have to have good control, or else it'll just sound like a dying duck, and you don't really want that. So this is the deeper one, deeper than the tenor. And then this one, this is the soprano saxophone. It's higher than the alto. It's key of B flat. This is a little bit strange, just because it comes in really three different shapes. None of the other saxophones have different shapes. As you can see here, this is curved like the alto or the tenor, so it's recognizable as a saxophone. You look at that and you go, ooh, saxophone. But if you look at, say, this one, it looks more like a clarinet, just because it's straight. As you can see here, it's just like one piece. It looks like a metal clarinet. People might just think it's a little bit strange. If you've ever heard of Kenny G, he plays one of these. They can be pretty mellow sounding. They can be really high pitched. They're like a clarinet. And then the third shape that the soprano saxophone comes in, it's kind of a mix. As you can see, it's straight, but then at the bottom it kind of flares out. It it I mean, it doesn't really do anything other than look cool. All three of those, it's just, if you think that this looks cooler than the other ones, then you would get this one. It's not really affecting the tone or anything like that. These next four I'm going to go over pretty quickly, just because you rarely ever see them. Starting with the two extremes, this is the E flat contrabass saxophone. It is in the key of E flat. It is humongous. I mean, as you can see here, it's bigger than a grown man. It's like it would eat you. You pretty much you would have to play the bari sax for a while before you even attempted one of these, just because you have to be able to control the saxophone really, really well before you can make these sound good. But once you can do that, it's awesome, because like you can get bone rattlingly low in these things. I mean, like the room shakes when you play it. It's awesome. And then the other extreme is the soprillo saxophone. This is a little bit strange. Once again, you would rarely ever see this. This is often called the piccolo saxophone, just because it's tiny. I mean, if you've ever seen the difference between a flute and a piccolo, I mean, it's a huge difference. This is tiny. It's key of B flat. I mean, you would pretty much have to be insane if you wanted to play this in your concert band. But I mean, if you want to just play it, go ahead. It's be cool to say that you play the smallest saxophone in the world. Then the next one is the sopranino saxophone. It is a little bit higher than the soprano saxophone, but it's in the key of E flat, like the alto saxophone. It's, once again, this would probably be the least seen, just because, I mean, most people would either play the soprano because it's more common, or the soprillo, just because they want to be different. I mean, this one, there's barely any music written for it. I mean, in a saxophone quintet or a saxophone band or something like that, you would see one of these, but other than that, not really. This next one is more for archival purposes. It is the C melody saxophone. It is in the key of C, which is different than all the other ones, because none of the others are in the key of C. They used to make a lot of these saxophones, but they don't anymore, just because need for them stopped during the Great Depression, and these were originally made because churches liked to have lower instruments so that the men singing could match the pitch. But the problem was nobody wanted to sit down and learn how to transpose music so that they could watch the pianist and watch the piano music and just transpose from that. Because if you tried to play the organ and the alto sax playing off of the same music, it would sound terrible. So they made this, and someone could learn this saxophone, and they didn't need to worry about transposing because it was in the same key. There's almost no music at all written for this. I mean, if you got one, it would be more just so you can play piano music. But still, it's pretty cool. It's in between the alto and the tenor. It's just a little bit bigger than the alto saxophone, and sometimes it'll have a curved neck, sometimes it'll have like this straight neck. It That's just how they were made. It varied a lot. These ones weren't they weren't mass produced as much, so they didn't really put a lot of engineering into these.